I'm going to start today's episode with a question for you. Do you ever struggle with burnout, anxiety, overwhelm, or maybe you feel kind of meh, like you disassociate or just kind of numb from your life, like you just aren't connected to it? If so, then you are going to love today's guest, Michelle Grosser. She is an amazing expert when it comes to the nervous system, and she's going to break down the difference between a regulated nervous system and how we can kind of control a lot of these motions and come to baseline, and a dysregulated nervous system. Michelle is an attorney, pastor, and a nervous system expert. She's a certified master life coach and the host of the Calm Mom podcast. Through systematic and neuroscience-based modalities, she coaches women through discovering what is beneath their triggers and emotions so that they can begin their healing journey and find peace in the present. She deeply believes that the most profound thing that we can offer our children is our own healing. She and her husband, Jeff, have 2 daughters, and they live in Houston, Texas. And today, as I said, we're going to break down how to reduce symptoms of burnout, anxiety, even how we disconnect sometimes, just kind of scrolling and becoming numb to our lives, and really regulate our nervous system to feel good and present in the moment instead of always in this fight or flight situation. We're also going to talk about how we can teach our children awareness of their nervous systems to give them coping skills, and then just some myths and some facts about regulating the nervous system and how we can recognize when it is dysregulated and truly create a better environment for us, obviously in the present, but also a better environment in our minds. But before we get into today's episode, we know everything links back to sleep. When we're talking about just feeling better in our bodies, when we're talking about hormones, fitness, food, gaining muscle, losing fat, whatever it is, everything links back to sleep. So it's really important to have a solid, comfortable pair of sheets and comfy pajamas to sleep in. You know, I am a massive fan of Cozy Earth. I have been so thankful that they've sponsored the podcast for a couple years now because I love, love, love their products. It is a perfect gift for Valentine's. If you want a really comfortable pair of pajamas that are like silky soft, they wash well, they wear well, I highly suggest a bamboo pajama set. They are so comfortable and you are going to love them because they are so cozy. For me, I've been in love with their sheets for a really long time. I love them because they have a really long warranty. They wash really well. They're temperature regulating and they're just have stayed soft after all the washes, and they are also bamboo sheets and just fantastic. Plus, they've been on Oprah's favorite things list in 2018, and they have a great warranty, as I said, where they're really easy to return if you don't feel like they're a fit for you. But I don't need to worry about that because I know you're going to love them because I literally love them. Their pajamas and their sheets. You will not look back, I promise, if you get some. My favorite thing is Cozy Earth gives my listeners 40% off their entire site. 40%. That is like such a great Valentine's gift. Hook yourself up. Use the code SIMPLE40 to get 40% off. And if you do the post-purchase survey, say that you heard about Cozy Earth through the podcast. I will also add the direct link in the show notes. And again, it's 40% off site-wide. My name's Andrea Allen, and I am a mother of 4 girls under 7, a wifey to a mountain man, a personal trainer, and a nutrition coach. I love all things women's health and fitness, but let's face it, the fitness industry is complicated and it's not built for the everyday mom. There's so much conflicting information, and you're busy and you don't have time to figure it out. I hate feeling confused and overwhelmed, so I have made it my mission to simplify health and fitness while creating a welcoming, realistic, and empowering home for like-minded women. I'm happy you're here, and I hope you stay a while. Hey, Michelle, I'm super excited to have you on today.
Thanks so much for having me. It's really good to be here.
So tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. For the better part of the last 15 years, I've been a trial attorney in Miami. I had a law practice there. I have 2 daughters. They're now 6 and 7. But when they were born, especially my second one, I just went back to work right away and ignored what I now know are really obvious signs of burnout that I think I was just ignoring and pushing through. Because I was so good at that, I think, and just thought that if I made it till, through that meeting next week or through that deposition or whatever, then life would get back to normal and I'd start sleeping again and feeling better. And invariably that doesn't happen. So I found myself in the throes of burnout, I think, where my body just kind of shut me down. And my physical symptoms got pretty bad. And it really caused me to kind of take a look at what was going on, which then opened up a whole world for me in understanding our nervous system. Because what I noticed with the professionals I decided to work with at the time was that that was like the through line through everything I was experiencing, the mental, emotional, and physical symptoms. So I started really diving deep on the nervous system. I took a whole year and studied it so hard. And now I host a podcast and coach women on how to regulate their nervous systems and heal through anxiety, overwhelm, and burnout. And my husband and I, we just moved this summer with our family. So now we live in Houston, Texas.
That is amazing. I love, and I feel like I say this every time we're on the podcast and listeners know, it's amazing when people, their passion is from their own experience. And I feel like it puts such a more passionate and in connection to what's going on. So let's definitely talk about the nervous system and regulating it. And what do you even mean by regulating the nervous system? Like, what does that even mean?
So when we talk about our nervous system, we're talking about really like our body's command center, right? So under the surface, the things that we might not even notice, our body is constantly gathering information. And, it's like, okay, that felt really good and that was good, or that made us feel really loved, or that was a little bit weird, or I'm not sure what they meant by that. And it's kind of storing away this information all of the time. And it's using that to help guide how we think and how we act and the things that we say and the decisions that we make going forward, ultimately to keep us safe. And when our nervous system is kind of scanning and gathering that information all the time under the surface, it's also kind of preparing us and trying to catch threats or stressors or things that might not be best for us before they can cause us any harm, right? So our nervous system is kind of always scanning. And when our brain perceives any sort of stressor or threat, it sends us into this stress response. So we kind of can talk about that like fight or flight. You guys have probably heard about that before, or a response called freeze or fawn. And then there's a physiological response in our body also. So it's not only that we're thrown into this stress response so we can do what we need to do to stay safe, but also our body is going to release things like cortisol and adrenaline and different stress hormones in order to mobilize us so we can respond appropriately to what it perceives as the threat, right? So when we talk about a regulated or a dysregulated nervous system, I think sometimes there's this oversimplification that when we're like, she's regulated or her nervous system is regulated, that they're calm, like we're calm all the time. And that's actually not true. Because if we're calm all the time, that's actually not a healthy nervous system, right? There are times where we need to be like spurred into action, or we should be feeling kind of a little bit activated or angry about something or worrying about something. When we're dysregulated, we're actually stuck in a freeze, in a stress response. So we're either stuck in fight or flight, or on the other end of the spectrum, we're kind of stuck in this disconnected, dissociated kind of burnout state. And our body doesn't feel safe enough to kind of complete that stress loop and come back to our baseline stress level. So when we say we aim to be regulated in our nervous system, what that means is actually that we have a flexible and resilient nervous system that can kind of shift between states, right? When I need to kind of like amp it up and hurry up in the morning and get my kids out the door, or when, I have to make a big pitch or I'm public speaking or something, it would be appropriate for me to feel that fight or flight, but then have practices to signal to my body, hey, we're good, we're safe now. You don't need to stay stuck there. You can kind of stand back and come back to baseline stress level and just be able to kind of flow between those states. That's a regulated nervous system.
So that's really good to know that regulated doesn't mean always calm. Because I'll be honest, right? When you said it, I was like, that means I need to keep my crap under control. So I love that you pointed that out, because it is like that it's like a false view of what it actually looks like. And I love that you said it doesn't mean you're always calm, right? It's like, I'm not regulated. So let's talk about, okay, so we know you need stress in both. That's fine. But we know the difference is that one, you're not able to bounce between calm and worked up. basically in layman's terms. So let's talk about what a dysregulated system looks like, signs of it emotionally, mentally, physically, any way that people can notice, because I think that's hard for people, because if you are able to get stressed and still be regulated, how can they recognize the difference?
Okay, that's a really good question. I think those are two different questions. So let's kind of start with the first part about like signs and symptoms of dysregulation, and then let's talk
Yes.
about the difference between how do I manage stress and stay regulated at the same time.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, so for the first part, I love talking about symptoms of nervous system dysregulation because I think so many of them, well, one, a lot of them have become normalized as far as like, well, that's just how life is. In 2024, as like a high achieving woman, if you're running a business, raising kids, professional, what have you, you're just going to feel X.
On the edge of
And
insanity.
it's not true. Yeah, exactly. Perpetually stressed and exhausted.
Like you're walking on a cliff,
and then
tiptoes.
Yeah, exactly. It's like teetering constantly. And then the other part of it is that so many symptoms of nervous system dysregulation are actually coping mechanisms for stress that we've taken on as like part of my personality. So we've just been like, oh, well, that's just how I am. And it's like, well, no, it's actually not. That's your body really trying to regulate. So let's talk about it. Okay, some mental and emotional symptoms of dysregulation. Obvious ones that we would think of were like anxiety, being just chronic exhaustion, being tired all the time, no matter how much you're able to sleep or rest, worrying all the time. If you're someone who has a really hard time kind of getting out of a spiral or ruminating. An example of a symptom of nervous system dysregulation that's so common in the women that I work with is staying busy all the time. If you have a really hard time kind of unplugging, relaxing, not doing anything, if that feels really uncomfortable to you, that's usually a symptom of a dysregulated nervous system. If you're an over planner and you need to know all the details to everything, that's often a symptom of a nervous system that doesn't feel safe and is just hyper vigilant and needs to know what's going on with everything. And then, burnout is a symptom of dysregulation. Other coping mechanisms, maybe it's, scrolling a lot, getting lost in Netflix, hours of Netflix, all of those kinds of things, that dissociation, those can be symptoms of a dysregulated nervous system. Edginess, irritability, those are ones that I see a lot too. And then on the physical side, when we just talked about that there's a physiological response in our body, right? When we perceive this threat and we get into fight or flight, our body will always prioritize our safety, obviously. So if our body's sending the signal that something's going on that doesn't feel safe and we have to run or we have to fight, our body will actually pause non-essential systems to our safety and survival. So that means that when our body thinks that we need to fight or we need to run, but it's actually, an email from our boss or, this big project that we're working on, our body will pause non-essential systems. And that has a big impact on our health. So things like our digestive system will be slowed, our immune system will be impacted, our reproductive system, those are not necessary for us to run or to fight. So we see a lot of symptoms related to those. So you might notice a lot of, maybe you're getting sick all the time and you're like, I'm always sick and it takes me so much longer than everyone else to feel better. Or maybe you've been dealing with chronic gut issues, IBS, gas, bloating, autoimmune conditions are often associated with chronic nervous system dysregulation, insomnia, muscle tension, joint aches, pains, inflammation. It affects your hair and your skin. Like there's so many things that are tied to it.
That is like so broad. Like there's so many things. So I think it's interesting to think about, almost if you're a listener, to replay that section and look at each section, because you talked about physical things, you talked about emotional things like signs, and think through almost checking off how many of them. There's some that I think I check off and I didn't even realize that. Like I have openly talked about how I'm very a busybody. I move and move and move. And I think part of that is I do have ADHD. So I'm always like, on to the next thing. You know what I mean? I'm like, go, 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 go. But I don't think I would have recognized that actually could over time harm your nervous system.
Yeah, that's a really common one. And I think it's, a big part of that. Yes, if you have a diagnosis of ADHD, that would explain a lot. And I think we've just been socially and culturally conditioned, right, to be productive, to get things done. There's so much on our to-do list. We have stories, I think, and like paradigms around what is rest lazy, or I have to earn my rest, or all these things, right, that are wrapped up in that. But ultimately, it's a nervous system that has to do and keep going and get things done. Because if I sit and slow down and rest, it's almost like this underlying urgency or this feeling like, oh, something's going to happen, right? The ball is going to drop.
Right.
It's not going to be good. Yeah.
And that actually makes sense to me because, just recently I've talked about some things I struggle with, hormones and such. And I've learned probably more in the last 6 months how much rest and recovery and actually checking out, clocking out, whatever it is, self-care, whatever you want to call it, how much it makes a difference in the way that you feel and the way that you function and the way that you work in your relationships and all of that. So even though I say I'm a busybody, I also recognize I have been overly busy sometimes and it has caused problems. So I love that you pointed out that it's not needed. And for balance in your nervous system, it's really not needed. So let's talk about some tools of how we can actually regulate our nervous system so we're not all running around feeling like we can't get out of fight or flight. It's 2025 and everyone's got 25 kids in different sports going different ways, and you better have A's for your kids and all the things, and Tommy's not getting along with Sally, and
it just doesn't end. Yep.
It's like you're in constant fight or flight. In fact, even just the other day, I did a poll and we're just, ask me anything. And someone responded and said, is there ever an opportunity where, as a mom, we're not stressed? Like we don't have high cortisol? I feel like my whole life is just running in high cortisol. So I'm really actually excited to talk about some tools of how we can do that.
Yeah. Okay. This is awesome. So here's what I'd like to do. If it's okay with you, I think we can talk about kind of like some foundational habits that support like overall nervous system resilience. And then maybe we can touch on some of those like hack in the moment things where it's like, oh my gosh, I feel so overwhelmed. I can do like X, Y, or Z, and that can help shift the state of my nervous system in the moment.
Yes, I'm all for both of those because we know you need the long term and then you need the short term to be able to make it all work together.
Precisely. Okay. So I teach 3 overarching, I think, like foundational practices that I recommend that we do as often as we can. I think you can do them daily, but if you can get them in, a few times a week, I think that's super helpful, that have a huge impact on the state of your nervous system, growing that resilience and that flexibility, and ultimately creating space, right? Because that's what we want. Like, I want to be able to do all of the things. I just don't want it to stress me out. Like, I want to be able to parent and have a marriage and like run my business. I just don't want it to drive me crazy.
Yes. I just don't want to tiptoe along the cliff. I want to do it all.
Some space there. Exactly. Okay. So the first foundational piece, the first foundational habit and practice is that we've got to move our bodies every day. Like, there's no more efficient way to close that stress cycle, that stress loop in our body than through movement. Because if you think about it, even just the name fight or flight, every single cell in our body when we're in fight or flight is primed for movement. We want to like run or fight. And if we don't do that, if we're feeling super stressed, so what do? We sit down and we like binge TV, or we're feeling super stressed, so we sit down and we eat, or we sit down and we work. That alarm system in our body actually just grows louder. Hey, you're not moving. This doesn't feel safe. We got to move, and you're not doing it. So actually just any sort of movement really helps to close that stress cycle in our nervous system. And we know it releases, right, all the endorphins and serotonin and all these different chemicals that are really good for our mood and our energy and help regulate our nervous system.
Now, do you feel like it's any movement?
Such a good question. Yeah. So if you tend to already be kind of higher energy and already kind of tend to notice that you're close to being activated or edgy or irritable or anxious, or you're just like in fight or flight, you can already tell. High intensity exercise is often enough to put you beyond your stress threshold and actually drive further dysregulation. Because ultimately that type of exercise is a stress on our body, right? And our body can't differentiate stress from famine or stress from a really intense workout. It's just stress. So our body will respond in a similar way. So if you're already feeling quite activated, gentle movement is honestly your best bet. And that's what's going to help you heal. Go for a walk, right? Instead of sitting at your desk over your lunch break, or, take your family out after dinner, like go for a walk outside 10, 15 minutes daily. Just that is enough to regulate your nervous system. Sit on the floor and do some stretching, some Pilates, right? Go up and down the stairs in your house, do some jumping jacks. Just really gentle movement is enough to really help make a difference in the state of your nervous system, without feeling that need to like push too hard.
Now, do you feel like you need to change your scenery? Does that help with the nervous system? I'm wondering with movement, because I know sometimes that, for me at least, makes a difference. And I've always been curious if with the movement, is it helpful to maybe switch your current location, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I love that question. So I think a couple of things. One, I think being in nature is very regulating to our nervous system, right? Like sunlight on our face, fresh air, listening to the sounds of nature. Like we were created to do that and participate in that. So for a lot of people, just getting outside can be really regulating. Switching environments when we exercise, or I think just in general sometimes, can bring regulation to our nervous system because one, it can help us to orient. So that helps us to ground, right? So we get out of our head, and then in a moment we're like, wow, I feel that cold air on my face, right? Or I feel the sunshine. Those types of things can be really grounding. The other thing with walking, like if you notice just getting outside and walking makes a big difference for you.
Oh, that's a huge one for me.
Yeah, it's bilateral movement. And when we participate in any sort of bilateral movement, whether it's walking or like if people have tried like EMDR or things that like body tapping where you're tapping your shoulders bilaterally, crossing your hands in front of you and tapping your shoulders, those kinds of things activate the part of our brain that helps us regulate our nervous system. So It's not only like being outside, fresh air, moving, serotonin and endorphins, dopamine, and all these things, but it's also that bilateral movement really helps to activate the calming part of our nervous system.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Number two, and we kind of talked about this, it's stillness. Getting some sort of stillness practice, or just being aware of how you can cultivate more moments of stillness in your day to day. So like if you already have a meditation practice or something, like good on you, awesome. I have a really hard time with that because I have kids and I have life and like all this stuff. I don't know if you can relate. Maybe, I don't know if you meditate.
Oh, 100%. So I'll be honest, I have a really hard time meditating. I'm sitting there and like my eyes twitching. I'm thinking of all the things I need to do because again, I'm a busybody. Something that I do feel like has helped me is I have to do guided meditations. I just started and I can't even do them long because I'll get distracted. I mean like
Yes.
5 minutes. I have an aura ring and it will be like, breathe with me for 5 minutes. And when it starts, I'm like, I feel ridiculous. But I'm amazed. 5 minutes in, my heart rate's down. It says that my stress is down. Like, so I'll let you finish. But like, I literally am like, I've tracked my stress. I've been really aware of it lately. And 5 minutes helps, but I have to do guided because otherwise I get distracted.
I love that. I think that's awesome. And ultimately what you're doing is you're creating intentional space where you're not being inundated with information and like stimulation overload and the lights and the sounds and the information and the requests and the pings and the dings. And you're making space without all of that for your brain to rest. And our brains so desperately need that time every day, but we're like one task to the other and just like sounds and lights and kids and work and everything all the time. So
All the bells and whistles.
yeah, like how can we do this? Well, one, start small. Like if you have to start with a 2-minute guided meditation or like 30 seconds where you lay in bed doing nothing before you like put your feet on the ground and start your day, just start small. But like if you do any sort of commute, driving, pick up, what have you, could you do that without the radio or without Sirius XM or without your phone playing a podcast? Could you go on that walk that you're going to go on without wearing your earbuds? Could you, fold laundry without a Netflix show playing in the background? Just cultivating ways that you can create space where you're not consuming information or being stimulated by, all the things that are always coming at us.
I feel like that's a great idea because you do always think, oh, I need this meditation where it's like peace. I feel my lips. I'm connecting to my eyeballs. My lashes are moving. You know what I mean?
Yes.
But even just that space, makes a difference, that we do always have something in our ear. I was talking to my sister the other day. She has teenagers and she's like, they always have their earbuds in, no matter where they go. There is sound in their ear. There is talking, there is music, there is podcasts. She's like, they don't have any dead space. And I have noticed myself that I have made an effort recently to put my phone to the side during certain times of the day for like, not have it at the dinner table, not have it when my kids come home. And you'd be amazed at it makes space. Like your phone is like a constant pinging, dinging electricity
It always needs
box.
something from you. Yes.
It does. So the space alone. So if you're someone who's like, girl, you're not going to get me to meditate, it's too much for me, just making the space.
Yeah, I think that's a good compromise, working your way
Yeah.
to meditating. So that makes a big difference. And if you're curious or if you're like skeptical, try it out, right? Try it out. And I promise you'll see. And then the third one that I love to teach is play. And I think that is like the most misunderstood tool we have to regulate our nervous system. I think one, we're already so busy that we're like, well, I don't have time for that. Or like, that's what my kids do. Or it's like, I don't even know what I would do. Like, what do you mean by play? Like actually have fun, like do something that I enjoy doing. And that's exactly what I mean, like doing those things. And maybe you did them, before you were married or before you had kids or when you were a kid, that just like lit you up. Like you could play your instrument or go skateboarding or play volleyball or whatever for hours. And like, maybe it was art, maybe it's baking, like whatever those things are that just like, it's not for your kids. It's not for your partner. It's just because you enjoy them. No one's like paying you to do it, and incorporating more of that on the regular. Not this big thing you have to put into your schedule and go out and buy all these supplies, but like, hey, if I love baking, I'm going to bake on, Tuesday afternoons or whatever it is. But when we play, I guess a couple things. One, we have a social nervous system. Our nervous system thrives in safe connection to others. So the more we can engage in play that involves other people, family game nights, kitchen dance parties, things like that, it's very regulating for our nervous system. And then on the other, the flip side of that, I guess, or part two, is that these are things that we would not do if we were in fight or flight, right? If we were running from a threat, I wouldn't sit down and like start just shooting free throws or whatever I'm doing in that moment. So we're signaling to our nervous system that we're safe. All the anxiety can stand down. We don't have to worry about this. We don't have to be rushing around. We're good. We're safe. We're playing. And that's really regulating to our nervous system.
Yeah, that makes sense. So any activity that we just feel comfortable in?
Anything that you genuinely enjoy.
Okay, so those are my 3 long-term. What about if we're in a short-term situation and I'm like about to lose it?
Okay, this is so good. Okay, let's start with this because I think it's important to understand this before we kind of get into like some in the moment tools I'll give you guys.
Okay.
The first thing is that as we study the nervous system, we understand that, our nervous system is sending messages in 2 different directions. So it's sending messages from our brain down to our body. So if you think of things like affirmations or working on our mindset or stuff like that. And then we also have bottom up approaches, right? Where we actually can do things with our body, i.e. move our body to send signals up to our brain. So there's messages coming from our brain down and then from our body up. Only 20% of the nerves in our body start in our head and send messages down to our body. So the coaching space is full of like mindset work, affirmations, CBT, like all these different things, right? Change your behavior, modify your actions, use these words, use these scripts. Awesome. And if we're not addressing what's going on from the neck down, that's like a 4-to-1 tug of war, right? 80% of the messaging going on actually originates in our body, sending signals up to our brain. So if we have, I don't know if you think of something that makes you nervous, like a lot of people public speaking, right? You can tell yourself, I'm ready, I've got this, I'm prepared, I have notes, I've done this before, this is safe. Your heart's still gonna be beating out of your chest and your hands still sweaty and your throat, your voice cracking and all of these things, because that's only 20% of the messaging coming from your head down to your body, and it's actually not enough to regulate you. So that's the first thing. We have to have body-based tools to bring regulation in the moment if we're feeling overwhelmed or anxious or worried or angry or what have you. We can't think our way out of it. And then the second part of that is that our body, now that we know we have to communicate with our body doesn't actually speak a verbal language. Our body doesn't understand logic or rationalizing or explaining or justifying or any of those things. Our body doesn't understand words. It's why we can't tell ourselves to like just chill out or don't worry about that or calm down. It doesn't work. We have to communicate safety to our body in the way our body understands. And the language of our body is movement, sound, touch, breath, music, all the temperature, all of those are things that can bring regulation and safety to our body, not words and not thinking. So like, I think that's really good to understand as we kind of walk through some of these practices.
I mean, even if you think when you're mad and your spouse says, just stop being angry.
It's not a big deal. Just calm down.
It's not a big deal. Yeah. So if you think about it, if you're saying it to yourself, it's not good. I mean, it's a little better than your spouse. Let's call it like it is. But like, it's not going to have the same, it's still not like the gold medal of making yourself calm down. Like you can repeat over and over and calm down, calm down, calm down. It's not still the gold standard.
That's right. You're not going to see a big impact from that. You're not going to feel a shift in the state of your nervous system. Okay. So what can we do? There are down-regulating and up-regulating practices. So when we are kind of feeling really active, so if you're feeling irritable, edgy, angry, anxious, you want to have nervous system tools that will help you down-regulate, right? Come down to your baseline. And then on the other hand, if you're feeling really burnt out or disconnected or dissociated, kind of like blah, you want to have practices that can help you up-regulate to come back to baseline.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so I'll give you some, and then also with this kind of caveat that to a certain extent, like these are bio-individual, so certain practices will help some of my clients and they'll be like, this is everything. And then another client will be like, I don't know about that. So the goal here is really like, maybe pick one or two as I'm going through them and like try them out. Okay. And if they work, keep doing them. Your body won't like get used to it or it'll become less effective. Like go all day with those resources. And if you try something and you're like, I didn't really notice much, no harm, no foul. It's just information, right? You can come back, listen to this part of the episode, and then try something else next time until you find a few things that work. Because the reality is when we're feeling overwhelmed or edgy or irritable or anxious, like you don't want to have 30 things that you could do to help yourself calm down because that's overwhelming too. It's like, now what do I do? So you want to have like 2 or 3 things that can help you down-regulate or up-regulate. Okay.
Then you're having what is it? Cognitive dysfunction on which calming item you should use.
I'm already at decision fatigue. I can't. So let's talk about some down-regulation resources. So if you're feeling, again, really like activated, like irritable, angry, super anxious, these are things that are going to help bring calm and safety to your nervous system. So I talked about movement already. My favorite like movement-based practices that can help us down-regulate. My favorite personally, and the one I love to teach the most, is shaking. And it's exactly what it sounds like. You literally just stand up and hold your arms kind of like in a goalpost, with your elbows at 90 degrees and your hands kind of up by your head, and just shake. Shake your hands out as hard as you can. Shake your whole body. Shake your legs out. Shake your arms. Shake your feet. Kind of do some hula hoops with your waist. And just allowing a lot of that really activating energy, that fight or flight, to kind of move through your body, run its course, right? And allowing it to release. And really only, 60, 90 seconds, maybe 2 minutes of that type of shaking can make a huge difference in really helping your nervous system to shift out of fight or flight and come back to baseline. If you're feeling anger, rage, that edginess and irritability, a great movement-based practice is wall pushes. So literally just going up to any wall in your house and kind of putting both hands on that wall and like pushing into the wall as hard as you can. That's like a really grounding exercise that can allow a lot of that energy that's flowing through you, that anger, that aggression, to kind of release and ground and express itself in a healthy way. You'll see after like 30 to 60 seconds of like, and you can make whatever sounds kind of come up, but as you're like pushing and just kind of grunting and sighing as you do that, you'll notice the shift where you'll like come off the wall and like, after
like a release.
When you've had like a really good cry and then at the end you're like, and like, it just feels so different. Yeah, that type of feeling. So those are some dancing. It kind of does the same thing as shaking, but like just put on an upbeat song and move in your office or bathroom or kitchen, and that will shift the state of your nervous system. So movement is a big one. Breathing is a big one. If you have like a breath work routine that you like to go to, or like a guided breath work session, those are great. But in the moment, I don't find those to be as practical, because it's like, my kids are like, I'm feeling myself becoming really triggered, and then I can't just like walk away for 10 minutes and go breathe. Those are more foundational. But an in the moment breath that's really powerful is called a physiological breath. And it just takes like 2 or 3 of these breaths to really shift the state of your nervous system. But this is how it goes. I'll explain it once and then we can do it once. But you basically breathe in through your nose as deeply as you can until it feels like your lungs are at capacity. And then at the top of you just do one more quick breath in through your nose and then out through your mouth. Yep, long, slow, extended exhale. Feel your shoulders dropping and everything kind of melting. Let's do one more together. In through your nose. Another quick one at the top. And then exhale through your mouth.
That I've not done that before. I've done like the 4-7-8 breathing and all the different kinds of breathing. I've not done that. And that little extra breath, for some reason, you're like, oh, okay, we're there. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's my favorite. And I can do it anywhere, right? I can do it like literally while someone's talking to me. I can do it while I'm driving. I can do it in a meeting. I can do it when I'm telling my kids to put their shoes on. Like I can do it anytime. And for me, man, 2 or 3 of those creates just enough space that I can like go on with my day. So I love that one. And then temperature can be really powerful in regulating our nervous system. Temperature changes. So a down-regulating temperature tool might be taking a shower or a bath, right? We've all like done that. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm just feeling really like whatever. I need to go just like take a hot shower. And we just feel so different after. Or an up-regulating practice could be cold temperature, like go in your freezer and grab, a bag of frozen vegetables and just holding that on the back of your neck, or holding ice cubes on the inside of your wrist. Those types of things can bring you back into your body and help you to upregulate if you're feeling really disconnected or dissociated. I can actually share like a tool of a bunch of different regulation resources with you guys. It's like just a PDF.
Oh, yeah.
There's just so many, and you can kind of go through it and just like, they're all pretty self-explanatory, and you can just try them and like, take a highlighter or a pen to it and circle the ones that seem to help, and then just kind of cross off the ones that don't until you're down to like your little handful.
I can put that in the show notes if you'll send it my way for people, because I know, like you mentioned, like you might try 1 or 2 and you might be like, nah, that wasn't the ticket. So you might need to try some different ones. So that's important. With these, what about our kids? Because I think one of the things I've learned is not only do I need to obviously regulate my own nervous system, and it's something I feel like I've become more aware of the nervous system probably in the last 2 years, and especially within the last year, probably, as I've worked on cortisol and some other things I've had going on. But I've thought so much about my kids and how I can teach them from a younger age to have some coping skills. So obviously we can use some of the ones that you said to teach our kids, but is there anything else we also need to include to have them recognize what's going on? Like not just like, Timmy, you need to go push against the wall. You know what I mean? Like what do we need to teach them? Because as parents, I want my kids to do it so much better than I did it. I want them to have the skills so much younger, and I want them to be better off than I was, just like I'm better off than my parents were. You know what I mean? Like we want to make people better. So when we're teaching our kids this, what do we need to explain to them? What do you feel like is effective? And do you feel like there is a quick mechanism, one that kids seem to be drawn to more?
Yeah. Okay. This is so good. So I think the first part of it, and this is so true with all of parenting, I think, is modeling healthy regulation as a lifestyle, right? Because, and I guess here's the the kicker. The research is showing that we actually share a nervous system with our children until they're about 7 years old.
How?
So they will,
Wait,
yeah,
how?
because our brain has what's called mirror neurons. And without us even realizing it, especially for the people around us with whom, our caregivers, right? The people that we feel really connected to and safe around, our brain is wired to mimic what they're doing and then do the same thing in order to keep us safe. So if we're really anxious or irritated or aggravated or whatever, they see that in our face, they hear it in our tone, they feel it in just our energy, and they're literally wired to mimic that. So they're starting those patterns of ways of being based on how we're showing up and what state we're showing up in.
Okay.
And then around 7, they start to have the capacity to be able to regulate on their own. Their brain changes. They're able to differentiate, like, I see that and I can notice it, but I don't necessarily have to imitate it. Right. And then, their development continues. But until they're about 7, they're really feeding off of and co-regulating with our nervous system.
Michelle, that's bad news, because you just taught me that when my kids are losing it, it's my fault.
And oh my gosh. Yeah. So it's a response. I think, yes, there's accountability there. We want to model good, healthy habits, right, for our kids and everything.
Yes.
And it's never too late, and we can teach them these things.
Yes.
And like, I'll speak for myself. My kids are going to need therapy about their own things that I didn't need therapy about, or I did need therapy about for my
Listen,
family.
we aren't flawless.
It's
We're not flawless. It's about constantly improving.
That's right. Okay, so that's the first thing I think is just like modeling a lot of this stuff for them. And then the second thing, I think before we can teach them all of these different tools for when they're feeling dysregulated or help them with emotional regulation, I think the first thing we can teach them that will be most helpful is to grow in awareness of their somatic cues. And what I mean by that, right, is that our body's always communicating with us. So before your, 7-year-old has like a major meltdown over whatever, your 7-year-old's body is giving them cues that they're starting to become dysregulated. So maybe your child like starts to clench their fists, or maybe their tummy starts to hurt, or maybe they notice that their shoulders go up by their ears and they start feeling like really tense and rigid, or maybe their voice changes, right? They start speaking faster or louder. If you can start to help them recognize those cues before they're like full-blown Hulk mode, in the future, they'll be able to catch that for themselves, and then they can start to use the practices that you're teaching them. Because once a human being is dysregulated, right, the part of our brain that allows us to like ask questions and make good choices and learn, that's all offline, right? We don't have access to our prefrontal cortex. So if we can teach them to start to recognize these somatic cues and then use the tools before they become dysregulated. If you think of like a stoplight, when we're just normal every day, regulated, we're in a green, we want them to catch what's going on when they're in that kind of yellow light zone before they get to the red. Because if we're just giving them tools for the red, those aren't going to be particularly effective. They're not in a place where they can like do these things. They're not using that part of their brain.
I'm thinking about my daughter who's 6.
Yeah.
I know the signs when she starts to get angry.
Yes.
So I need to point those out to her and
You
say,
can start
hey,
narrating it.
do you notice, like when she starts to feel it, like, are you noticing that your fist clench and that your voice starts to get she starts to get like a higher voice when she, not even yelling yet, just it's like a higher voice.
Yep.
And kind of pointing those things out to her. And then once we point them out, then we can say, instead of, feeling that way, we can actually help you calm down. And is that how you would do it?
Okay, so I think the first way I would do it when I'm pointing it out to my child would be like, hey, I'm noticing that your voice is getting louder. Hey, I'm noticing that your hands look really tight and mad right now. And then introduce the practice that you can do with them.
Okay, yeah.
And here's something that's super important. Same thing when we talked about movement. When our body is in fight or flight and our kids are getting into fight or flight, and we're primed for movement, trying to just calm down actually goes against what our body's natural impulse is when we're in fight or flight, right? So a lot of times we'll also tell our kids like, calm down or take some deep breaths. They don't want to take deep breaths. They want to like hit something or stamp their feet or push against a wall or take a pool noodle and slam it into a tree or like whatever they want to do, right? They don't want to take deep breaths. And it's not because they're being punks. It's because that's not what they're being wired to do in this moment.
Okay.
So having tools like, hey, I notice that your hands are like really tight right now. Let's go, scream into a pillow together for a minute and see if that helps you feel better, or, whatever tool that you have. And then you can talk about it after, once they're regulated, right? Once they've come back down, they have access to their prefrontal cortex. It's like, hey, do you notice that half an hour ago when you started getting upset about that, I noticed that, this happened with you started breathing really mad or whatever. Did you notice that? Yeah. And then remember when we went and like stomped our feet in the backyard, I noticed that you started to calm down. Yeah. Maybe next time when you notice that happening again, you can go stomp your feet in the backyard. And it's not going to be like a magic formula, and next time they're going to catch it and go stomp their feet. But consistently, right, over time, as you repeat and teach and they practice, you'll be surprised at how they're able to catch it, and then they'll just go regulate on their own.
That makes such sense, because when I was thinking it through by myself, I thought, okay, I recognize the signs. I say, okay, we need to be calm. Now let's do the thing. And you're saying, no, recognize the sign, have them do the movement.
With
and
you,
then,
yep.
Yes. And then once they're calm, then you say, did you notice how that made you relax after they've already done the movement, which you've already said has been so helpful. The movement is it. We can't use the words to say, this is going to help you calm down. We have them do the movement and then we recognize it.
That's exactly right. That's it.
Okay. That makes sense to me. And is there one that the kids like more? Like, do you have a couple? I like the stomping feet one. Do you have another one you can kind of throw out for some of us parents?
Yeah. I mean, pillow
kids?
slams they love. So like just grabbing a pillow and, slamming it, and they can like scream and yell while they do that, like, ha, and then like throw it on the ground. They love like hitting things with a pool noodle. I talked about that. Shaking, like just jumping jacks, like, okay, let's do 10 jumping jacks together. And then just kind of see and notice where they're at. But I think active movement-based exercises, especially when our kids are feeling activated, and then you can introduce something that feels soothing, right? Then we can breathe, take some breaths together, or then we can kind of just stand and sway our arms, or, things that feel calming to us. But first we've got to kind of move and let all of this anger, frustration, or disappointment out. And then we'll kind of do something that feels calming.
Yeah, that makes sense. My daughter, I have my oldest, she's a twin, but she has ADHD as well. So sometimes when she gets worked up, it's hard for her to let it go mentally.
Yeah.
And so one thing we've done, and I'm curious if this is helpful now talking to you, is she will do a countdown shaking. She shakes her right hand 10 times. She shakes her left hand 10 times. We've taught her to shake her right foot, then her left foot. Then she does 9, 8, 7, and she counts down. And we found, in my brain, I thought it was calming just her mind. But now talking to you, I'm like, it was the movement, which helps. Yes. And obviously the counting distracts her from
it interrupts, right?
That's the better word. Yes. Okay. Yep. Interrupts. That's a better word. Because I thought it was just the counting. But now after talking to you, I'm like, okay, it's both the interruption and the shake. It's just a different variation of the shake that you mentioned.
That's right. And I love that you bring this up, because one of the things that I teach is like when we're feeling overwhelmed, when we're stuck in like ruminating, worrying about something, anxious, like worst case scenario, those are all just red flags to get out of our head and into our body. Like that's the thing. Like for years, I was just like, out of your head, Michelle, and into your body, because I would like, let me plan, let me like bring out my budget again. Let me like read another podcast, read another book again. Like, no, out of your head and into your body. Yes.
This is so important for moms to know. Like, I do feel like we can do the movement, but if our head stays in it, the movement's not going to do it. You got to bring both. You got to do both.
That's right. Yeah. So I love that your daughter does that. That's brilliant.
Do you have any other ideas for like how to bring our head with the body? Like, that wasn't the best use of words, but you were with me.
Yeah, I totally am with you. Okay, so how about our senses?
Okay.
I think that's a great way.
That's a big one.
What are 5 things I can see? What are 4 things I can hear? What are 3 things I can touch? What are 2 things I can smell? And just orienting yourself that way, right? You're using your physical senses, but there's also an element of like awareness. And that's another, you're interrupting, right? What's happening up there. Things like journaling, I think those can be helpful after the fact, but I don't think they're going to be particularly regulating in the moment if you're feeling activated.
Okay.
Our nervous system does, feel safe with a plan. So that's why that can tend to be our go-to, but it won't actually help shift, I think, the state of our nervous system. That's a good, after practice.
Okay. So I do want to ask you a couple questions about myths and just kind of debunking things that are actually incorrect about the nervous system before, we finish out. Is there any like misconception or something that you feel like is misunderstood when it comes to regulating the nervous system or systematic practices or anything that you're like, man, I wish that thought process would just go away. It's not helpful.
Yeah, there are. We've talked about a few of them already. I think one big one is that we kind of carry this, not a goal, but maybe like a pressure to be calm all the time, thinking that that's what it means to be regulated. And I love just like, I even struggle with the name of my podcast because it's called The Calm Mom. And I'm like, I don't want to be part of this like perpetuation of this idea that we should be calm all the time because we shouldn't. That's actually not healthy. So I think that's a big misconception, just understanding that having the capacity to feel the full range of human emotion, but not getting stuck in any of them, that's a regulated nervous system. I think a second one is thinking that these practices are things that are going to take a long time, right? It's like, I don't have time for that. It's just so easy for us to say that, right? But really what we want to do is create a life that's regulating. So it's not so much like adding all this extra stuff to your planner or your calendar, your to-do list, but it's like I have shifted the way in which I go about my day-to-day so that I create space for my nervous system to be healthy and feel safe and thrive. And then I think the last part of it, I think, and this kind of comes down to what we were talking about just like our social conditioning, is that so many of these things we try to push through, right? We're like, if I just like finish this project, or if I just get through this season, or if I just whatever, then I'm going to like finally feel better on the back end of it. And the truth is that nothing heals by pushing harder. And that's true for our nervous system, right? If you had like a broken leg and went to your doctor, they wouldn't be like, great, it's broken, go train for a half marathon, right? It's like, no. And the same is true with our nervous system. We actually need like rest and stillness and all of the things that our body needs to heal. So a lot of these practices, they feel uncomfortable just because we're unfamiliar with them, right? And these ways of being. But something that's been helpful to me is to think of them like a slingshot. Because in a lot of ways, I sometimes feel like I'm pulling back and it's like, I still have so much to do. Like, I don't have time to rest right now, or I don't have time to like go close my eyes for 20 minutes, or I don't have time for a 5-minute meditation or breath work today or whatever. But I always remind myself like, Michelle, it's a slingshot. Pull back for 10, 15 minutes and the rest of your day is just going to like go so much better, and you're going to get more done, and you're actually going to be more productive and feel more fulfilled and at peace because you've like taken that time to have that like slingshot moment.
That is an amazing comparison. And I actually always end my podcast by asking, in your situation, if you were talking to a woman who felt stuck or stressed or overwhelmed, what would you tell them? But to me, you already answered it by saying,
Perfect.
It's not about not having time. You have to make the time. Yeah. So I guess what is something else you'd want that woman to know? You kind of already gave her like the best piece of advice before, but what else would you want her to know? Maybe just as she moves forward in trying to adjust and trying to regulate her nervous system and seeing those gaps for her, seeing those gaps for her kids, her loved ones, whoever, like, what do you want her to know? Because I do feel like overwhelm and anxiety and like the constant hamster wheel is weighing on our society. Like, we're all feeling it. We all feel like we're in it. And I know how important this is.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I think what I would share, or actually it's like an invitation, what I would invite you to is to really explore curiosity. Because I think in this whole journey of regulating your nervous system, that's probably one of the superpowers that we have that we don't really utilize. And what I mean by that is like, something can happen to trigger us, or we start growing in awareness of like, man, I just wake up feeling anxious every day. Or like by 5 o'clock, I cannot wait to have a glass of wine to take the edge off because I just want to like bite everyone's head off. It's like we start to notice these things. And then what happens? I think we're conditioned to like judge ourselves. Man, what's wrong with me? I'm going to like mess up my kids. Why am I so angry? Like I'm like, whatever it is, right? That's the
everything's your fault instantly.
Yeah. We're so hard on ourselves. But if we can shift that judgment to curiosity, right? Man, why am I feeling like I want to bite everyone's head off right now, right? Why am I waking up? Like, are the things that I'm doing actually serving me? How can I rethink, like, at 15-minute increments, maybe my day, and take a look and be like, hey, is this actually supporting me feeling grounded and present and at peace? And I think the more we can get curious, we can start to, the act of regulating our nervous system is way more subtraction than addition. Like, you actually don't need to do a ton more stuff. You actually need to do a ton less. That's what's going to be healing for you. So just taking a look at the things we're doing, what can we remove? What can we delegate? What do we not need to be doing? What can we, just change? And then getting curious about our triggers or the things that are going on, even our own internal voice, and just kind of following where that path of curiosity leads. Because sometimes those answers are just so much more helpful than, that inner critic that tends to pop up.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's important, like you said, like sometimes we see that we want to make changes, but it's important to see where we can make space. Like you said, we need to adjust. And I think sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm going to make changes. I'm going to do A, B, and C. Yet I don't change my schedule at all, thinking it's going to happen.
Miraculously, I'll have more time.
If I want to gain something, I've got to give something. And that's something I've realized, that if I want to gain being more present or having more space or more relaxed time, then I've got to give something for work, or I've got to give something socially, or I've got to give something that's just an extra, that's maybe not truly fueling my family. It's not truly helping us. And I've got to give those things. And so sometimes it takes a look within to say, if I want to get more space, how do I get rid of some stuff?
That's exactly right.
Yeah. It's hard.
It is. Well, it's uncomfortable. And when we're willing to be uncomfortable and like lean into that discomfort, that's when we expand our edges, and that's when we find our breakthrough. So yes, it is. It's simple, but it's hard.
And it's always so worth it. It's so worth it though. Like the few things that I've given up to try to make more space, I'm like, wow, that was better for my family. That was better for me. That was better for work. Like, but you don't see it that way in the moment. So I love that you said that. Okay, Michelle, where can we find you? Instagram, what's your, website, any freebies? I know we're going to put the PDF of your ideas of things to do to regulate, but like anything you got, give it to us.
Okay, awesome. So the best place to find me is at my podcast. It's called the Calm Mom Podcast. You can find it anywhere you listen to podcasts. You can find me on my website. It's just my name, michellegrosser.com. All the information's there. And then I'm also on Instagram at It's Michelle Grosser. I'll give you guys that regulation resources PDF. But even better than that, I have a nervous system reset guide. It's also a PDF, but it kind of walks you through like a step-by-step. There's an assessment as part of it to kind of gauge burnout. If you're experiencing that, which 89% of us are, I think the statistics are showing. So there's that, and then it walks you through somatic body-based practices that you can kind of start playing around with. There's a guided breathwork meditation in there. There's a link to one. So that's also a great resource too that I'll give you guys.
Oh, that's perfect. I'm going to start doing your breathwork now to calm down. No, but really, guys, really, that's fantastic. I love that. I'll put all of those in the show notes so you can easily find Michelle. She's amazing. Thank you so much for being on today. I feel like this is so needed. I feel like burnout is very much like a buzzword right now, but at the same time, you're like, no, it's a problem. It's truly a problem. Like, yeah, we're all talking about it, but are we actually doing anything about it, or are we just all talking about it? Let's do something about it. And so I'm so thankful you came on today to give us ideas that we can actually do and we can change.
Amen. Yes, thank you. You make it so easy and so fun. So thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. I really hope that you're walking away with some actionable tips. I know I am. I wrote down some ones I felt like I could easily try, some ones I could easily teach my children. And I'm really excited to think about this. I do feel like we live in this space where we are all such go, go, go. And as she said, statistics show that 89% of people feel burnout. So we need to be able to make more space and to really think about how we can regulate our nervous systems. And it's not always about being calm 100% of the time, but being able to get ourselves out of that fight or flight and back into a regulated situation so that we can feel good way more often than not. I did link in the show notes everything that she mentioned, so you have access to that. And I really hope that with these tools in the next couple of weeks, we're all able to bring our anxiety, our overwhelm, our burnout down just a little bit and reconnect and just feel present in our lives. All right, that's it for today. As always, you are doing so much better than you think you are. We'll chat next week.